And by the way, Sean, I've got in the background, I've got a German Shepherd puppy currently asleep, so I hope he doesn't wake up during the podcast. But if you hear strange noises, you'll know what it was.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Energy Markets podcast. It is Monday, the 16th of June. And for anybody who cares, it is Bloomsday. You can Google that afterwards. Happy Bloomsday to all those who are, anyway, concerned about that. Oil prices, Brent crude up a little change this morning, up about 0.5% after the big climbs last week. Inevitably, a massive weekend with the Israel-Iran war, I think you can now call it. It ultimately, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So I'm going to call it a war. Omar Najia, derivatives trader at BB Energy, your thoughts on these events? I mean, ultimately, since last Wednesday, when the US government announced it was going to start removing non essential staff out of the region, oil prices are up 12%, up about $8 on Brent. Does that represent the geopolitical risk premium to supply? That's about enough. We won't see any more until there's actually infrastructure hit. Your thoughts on this event, this war, and its ramifications for trading oil?
So, I mean, people are surprised, right? So, market opened higher this morning and then drifted off. And everybody's like, yeah, that's it. It's all we're going to see. Everything's fine, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, we've had basically multiple refineries blow up. We've had Tel Aviv blow up. We've had Tehran blow up. We've seen the Israelis say it's going to take weeks and weeks, and we've seen the Iranians say the same thing. We've seen Trump, say like, there's going to be nothing left of Tehran, and you have to make a deal and all this kind of stuff. So it's. I mean, if you're Iranian, you're thinking, right, you can't make a deal with the US because they're not agreement capable, right? Israel can't make a deal because that means that Netanyahu, basically, his government would simply collapse and he's headed to jail in Israel, let alone the ICC stuff, right? So the Iranians can't make a deal, the Israelis can't make a deal, and the US, I mean, Trump, every single thing that he's done in terms of foreign policy has been a complete catastrophe. From Ukraine to Gaza to Iran, it's like, it's like the tail wagging the dog. So it's like a disaster. So as to oil prices, what you have to understand is nothing, there has to be somebody who's selling for other people to buy. It can't just be one way. So basically the way it works is like I don't know, it's like when you go to a bar, you have a couple of drinks and all of a sudden you're talking to somebody and they don't look so good, but after like three, four drinks, it's like, whoa, yeah, whoa, yeah.
It's been a while,
So
I have to
so
admit. It's been a
yeah.
while, but
So what I'm trying to say is the market is
what's the chat up
deluding.
line? You can tell me in
The,
the chat
the
room.
market is delulu. The market basically is thinking that everything's okay, and look, it's not that bad. We find it's fine. Everything is going to be okay. But I think there's going to be a big surprise. So if you look at WTI, there's a line that goes back to 2023. It's been there for 2 years, downtrend line. You break that, and we're off to the races. And today, on Friday, we went above it. We closed below it. This morning we went above it and we're trading below it. And I think that if we can get above that line, and I'm pretty damn sure we're going to get above that line, because don't forget it's trending lower. So it gets lower every day. So we're going to close above it and then we're going to be off to the races. And I think people who are saying that, "Oh, it's okay, and it's not going to affect the economy. It's not, prices aren't going to go up and it's all going to be out there." I think they're going to be in for a kind of a big surprise. So I think considerably higher.
Neve Beck-Burney, Associate Director at Control Risks. Neve, I suppose the $6 million question, or whatever amounts to a lot of money these days, is, have we passed the off ramp for this war to somehow get sort of closed down? Is there still an off ramp? Your thoughts on that element of things?
There's always an off ramp. The question is how long it takes and what it looks like. And the more that happens, that off ramp will change. But in any conflict throughout history, there is always one. But the off ramp that there may have been 3 days ago when this started, as of today, looks very, very different. To speak metaphorically, we are not in April and October territory of last year. It is reasonable to say that this is going to be a significant conflict in the sense that it is meaningful to both countries. It is particularly meaningful for Israel. They have viewed for a long time Iran as an existential threat, and this is the best opportunity that Israel perceives to counter that existential threat. But ironically, when it comes to oil markets, I just kind of slightly want to push back on what Omar said about the idea of a big surprise. There is the potential of a big surprise, but what I'm looking for is Abadan refinery targeted and Ishaq Island terminal targeted. There's a couple of reasons why that could be the big surprise, but there's a couple of reasons why I think the market hasn't reacted in the way that we would all expect it to, even over the weekend. And that's first of all, because the likelihood of the Strait of Hormuz actually being closed, and I'm sure we'll get to this in more detail later, is actually relatively slim as things stand as of today. At least that's the control risks view. There is a world in which the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed, and we can talk about the potential for that. The second is that one of the factors stopping Iran doing that is the considerable amount of refined products imports that it still needs to be able to import for domestic consumption. The fact that two large depots, particularly the one outside Tehran, have been targeted over the weekend shows that they're going to need those imports more than ever to be able to fuel the war effort. Literally move things around because trucks and cars need petrol and diesel, and they're still going to need those. And the other thing as well is there is a range of 25 million to 75 million, barrels sitting in storage in floating tankers around the world, depending on which of the agencies you take as your barometer. So there's still reasonable slack, one could argue, in the market here. So I wonder if those are a couple of things that are factoring into why we haven't seen the sharp uptick as of this morning, because the market has realized that maybe the risk is not as immediate as a lot of people might think.
Adi Imsirovic, welcome back to the platform, Director, Surrey Clean Energy and Senior Associate at CSIS. Adi, if you were still at the front end of trading, where you spent much of your career, how would you be navigating this moment? Is this a moment to short, given that we've seen a lot of drama over the last few years, but the oil markets have always given back? There's so much slack, there's so much oil supply out there that worst case scenario even would nearly not really move the dial dramatically. Your thoughts on how to trade? How will traders be looking at this market?
Well, just before I say, good
Please.
morning, by the way. Just before
Yeah.
I say how I would trade it, just to kind of consolidate a little bit what's been said already, and I think I agree with both views to an extent. The market really takes into account anticipated events and not the barrels right now. So the flat price went up originally $10, came down and settled lower than that. One sort of views that the Strait of Hormuz is unlikely to be closed. But one thing I would definitely agree with Omar here is that this is a little bit more significant, at least the way I see it, than the rest of the market. I mean, we've got a pretty complicated situation where a rogue prime minister, supported by a rogue president, is attacking a rogue regime. I mean, what on earth can possibly go wrong here? So, my worry is that at some stage, and I think it was last week, it was Senator Lindsey Graham said that, oh, if diplomacy failed, that was just before the attack. He strongly believed it was America's national security interest to go all in to help Israel. And if this situation continues, I think the United States may well have to be involved. Now, the biggest loser in the whole situation is China, because they import pretty much all the Iranian oil. I think what hasn't been said already, very important outside oil. oil is probably less important than LPG. Iran is a big exporter of LPG, which is used in Asia for petrochemical industry, which is already it's kind of halfway on its knees. So I'm afraid that the uncertainty is just so great that as a trader at this stage, I would only sell if I had some serious profits to take. Otherwise, I'll be covering my shorts or if anything, going long at these levels. I mean, look at the market. We moved from what, $69 now, what, less than $5 higher. It's nothing really, fairly small. The other thing is also if we lose any barrels, they're like to be Middle East barrels. At the moment, and understandably, it's not quite priced in because if you look at the Brent spreads, they're a lot stronger than Dubai spreads. Now, that's natural because people usually go for liquidity rather than basis risk. So everyone is buying liquid Brent front month, and you've got the front spread blowing out quite a lot. But the front spread on Brent is much wider or much higher than the Dubai one, which I think over time would equalize. So that's my take. I think market is a little bit more complacent that they should be. I would certainly be long here because there are just too many risks, and I just don't know where this conflict is going.
Omar, on the risks from the point of view of supply, obviously Iranian barrels at the forefront of that, but in a contagion situation or even a Straits of Hormuz incident without it having to be defined as a closure, but ultimately Saudi Arabia can export most of its oil out of its Red Sea terminals. The UAE now has Fujairah, where it has close to 50 million barrels of crude oil in storage, and its pipeline, its major crude goes through the outside the Straits of Hormuz, etc. So from a really sort of ultimately worst case scenario here, there's a lot of contingency in the system, and so $8 up on or 12% from the last few days of trading. Is that not sufficient to categorize the current risk profile?
Yeah, I mean, if you think that the straits aren't important, everybody has contingency plans and everything will be okay, yeah, everything's fine. If you think basically that Iran is thinking to itself that it's under attack, the Israelis are saying, they want regime change, people to, topple them. The Americans saying we should get involved and pray for Israel. If you think that basically when all that happens, they're thinking to themselves, we should shut the straits because we need to export our stuff. I mean, I think it borders on the delusional.
But taking back, build a few
about,
bridges there as to why that would be, basically you globalize the crisis so it puts economic pain on the world's biggest economies.
Man, of course. So what is your biggest weapon? What is your biggest weapon as Iran? You want to go basically toe to toe with the US? You fire a missile, they fire a missile, or you fire one, they fire 20. What can you do to hurt the US? You can close the Strait of Hormuz, make everybody go bananas, make them pay like whatever, $20 for gasoline, I don't know how much for natural gas, make it absolutely go nuts. Make the S&P start to sell off and everybody asks Trump, what have you done? That's what you do. And what's it cost you? What's it cost you? And I find it incredible that people think that when you target a country and you want to destroy it, that they're just going to basically just sit there and say, yeah, you know what? We're not going to do anything. We're just going to stay and basically we're not going to use the biggest. I mean, there were reports over the weekend that there was a guy from the parliament, whatever, saying, Iran is considering, shutting the Straits of Hormuz or whatever. But in the West, it's not a word. I mean, it's so what we're saying. I agree with what Adi was saying, basically. So you've got reality on one side, and you've got the way that people are writing and talking about it on the other. And it's just the gap is huge. But I think this is the new world we live in. It's like night and day. It's like Trump saying that, Xi called me and we have a big, beautiful deal and we're going to cut. No, we're not going to cut. We're going to spend. Yes, we want a deal. No, we don't want a deal. Yes to enrichment. No to no enrichment. There's no agreement possible. It's not going to happen. It's going to
So
get
there's no
worse.
off ramp on your part. I mean,
There's
in
no off
terms
ramp.
of
How can you have an off ramp with if a country basically, if Trump says, yeah, we fooled the Iranians, we told them that this would happen, it's going to get a lot worse until what kind of, I mean, how to negotiate with somebody
well,
like that? So
Neve, if we look at this as a I suppose as I started my sentiment introduction that this is a war between two countries. Uh, uh, Does Iran have cards to play here? I mean, obviously they've lost all their proxies in recent years, Lebanon, Syria, uh, whatever they had with Hamas and Palestine. They have no air cover because the Israelis took it out last year. Their ability to fight a conventional war with Israel, is it realistic? Do they have to resort to dramatic ideas like the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, any country always plans a range of options as to, when they have to fight a conflict or when they feel they have to fight a conflict and how they fight it. So is that going to be one of the options of the table? Absolutely. How many cards do they have? Really, very few. And that was reinforced over the weekend. Although the Israelis have said that they have, full ability to operate in Iranian skies. Like we know from last night that's not true. Because of the much more extensive relative to the previous 2 or 3 ballistic missile barrage there was over Israel last night. Haifa refinery was hit for the second time in 24 hours. So, it still has some cards. One of those cards, ironically, not in this conflict, but in the relationship with the US, is the nuclear talks. Neither the US nor Iran has completely walked away from the talks. And that is still on the table in the world of where you need diplomatic options to be able to supplement your military options as well. And up until the point that Iran does walk away, that is still going to be a card in its hand, is going back to the talks, whatever the talks end up being. But it's less about that. It's about the channel for diplomatic communication. And it's really important to emphasize that hasn't closed yet. That is still something they can use.
Adi, looking slightly wider, obviously today is the meeting of the G7 in Canada, which includes obviously the G7 leaders, but also a number of others, including the regional Arab Gulf leaders are in attendance and the Indian Prime Minister and so forth. So what expectation would one have that that gathering can somehow deliver something that puts a reversal on this or put some sort of hope that this can be contained? Your thoughts on G7 happening at this particular moment and the world looking to it as for leadership ultimately?
Oh, absolutely. I think there'll be massive pressure from everyone on Donald Trump to rein in his dog, the Netanyahu. Nobody's benefiting out of this other than, as Omar said, Bibi keeping himself out of jail. Nobody. Iran obviously is not ready for this war. Clearly, he's been hurt quite badly. Europe and the United States do not like it because it's just at the worst possible time in terms of economy. Let's just remind your listeners that the World Bank actually dropped GDP projections from 3% to 2.3% for this year, and again, very
Before
low
this
for
event
next year.
started.
Before the event started, we've had inflationary pressures due to fantastic policies of Donald Trump everywhere because of tariffs. We've got pressure on the economy because of tariffs. We've got high yielding bonds in the United States preventing the Fed from doing anything about it. They simply can't drop the rates because the yield is too high on T-bonds. So the economic situation is quite poor. Look at China. China's CPIs have been very, very poor. The only positive thing have been retail sales. I think going back to our oil industry, I think the throughput in Chinese refineries is the lowest since right after COVID. So demand is very, very low, and some 30, maybe even 40 million barrels of Iranian oil are floating off the shores of China at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what China does actually. That will be a very good indicator where they see the conflict going. If you see China buying, they didn't buy this oil at $65. If they start buying this oil at $70+ that would probably mean that they see a serious escalation of this conflict. But they're fairly comfortable with that oil. So overall, there would be huge pressure on the American president to rein in Bibi, because he's the only person benefiting out of this. Israeli people are certainly not benefiting, as you can see on TV. Those horrible missiles raining on Israel and destroying even Israeli infrastructure, which was a bit of a surprise to me, given the so-called Iron Dome. So yeah, there will be big pressure on the United States to do something about it.
Let's go to the survey question, obviously touching a little bit on the theme of this morning's conversation. Brent crude oil is up 12% since June 11th, when the US first announced the withdrawal of non-essential staff from the region, first meaning big signal that something was going to happen. Geopolitical risk premium is unlikely to rise much further until oil supply infrastructure is actually targeted in the Israel-Iran war. Do you agree or disagree with that premium, that this sort of 12% surge in the last few days of trading, that until we see something tangible, that we've sort of had our spike? Agree or disagree with that thought? Omar, your sort of thesis on that, if indeed your trend or your tone and your commentary indicates that this continues to rise, or will it take an incident, an event, something specific for there to be a clear disruption of supplies, however that would happen, by accident, by design, whatever that, or are we going to see another climb up this week like we saw on Friday, 5-10%?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you got to think about is the oil market is a $1 trillion+ market. I mean, I don't know how big it is, but it's pretty massive, right? So when you say like it's gone up 12%, that's a lot of money, right? So it's not the same as something else smaller that goes up like that. So the thing to keep in mind is the following: one, the market is still short. I think that about 50% of shorts have covered. The market is still short. Why? Because we still haven't gone over and closed over that $75 line. Two, the world, basically, the analysis of this war is that everything is going to be okay, and it's the same logic that brought us here, which means that there is no sense for this war to occur because there is no victory possible. You're not going to defeat a country of 85 million people by hitting it from the air. You're just not going to do it. So what's the point? It's absolutely pointless. The reason why—
Well, you can destroy a lot of infrastructure by
sure you
above
can,
the
but
air,
you will,
especially when you
be
don't have any
basically—
air cover.
But I'm sorry to say that again, these stories that you read, people quote me the Jerusalem Post and the New York Times and the London Times of Jerusalem. These are all Israeli allies. They're telling you stuff like they did with Russia. Russia's losing, Ukraine is winning, and all of a sudden, oh no. The bottom line is that in terms of a long drawn out war, Israel cannot sustain it without the US. The US is owned by Israel, owned, lock, stock, and barrel, owned. It's no surprise to anybody. You got to say it. It's owned. They say it. AIPAC says it. Netanyahu says it. They're owned. And what are they going to do? They're going to go into the Israeli side and hit Iran because they are delusional. And it's going to be a long war, and there's no agreement capable. How can you agree with somebody? How can you talk about nuclear arms if somebody's arming, financing, and giving intelligence to somebody who's trying to kill you? It's delusional. It's like, oh yeah, let's sit down and talk because now we can agree. Iran already signed a piece of paper with the US, and the US reneged on it, just walked away, rubber stamped by the UN Security Council. So I think that they understand by now that there is no agreement possible. I mean, if they're normal, maybe if they're stupid, not, but if they're normal, they know there's no agreement. So what's left? Fight. They've been preparing for years for a fight with America. So let's see what happens. Israel has an Iron Dome, which is not working so well. Iran is sending missiles so that the Israelis shoot them down with their high-cost missiles, and they're wasting ammunition. We saw what happened in Ukraine. It's the same playbook that Russia did to Ukraine and to NATO. And people are still like, no, they're winning. They've been devastated. Nothing's been devastated.
Okay.
85 million people, a country 3 times as big as Texas. Jeez, it's been a day.
Niamh, the sort of challenge of whether this sustains or not, the idea that there are other sort of literally shoes to fall or whatever one might particularly paint here. What do you think are the next dominoes? Is this current profile sustainable for days and days? Barrages going either direction? Your thoughts of sort of what this looks like over the coming week?
Well, one of the things that is categorized as conflict already is how fast it's moved. I think if you talk to anyone who had been brainstorming what a conflict like this would look like, and a lot of us in the analytical and think tank community have been thinking about it for the better part of 10 years, we wouldn't have said it would have moved as fast as it has. And that's one of the most concerning things about this. We're expecting more targeting of economic assets, that started over the weekend. That's probably going to intensify. There is clearly some more military targets to be taken out as well. The concern that we have right now is at what point does Israel start going after political related targets in Iran, which would suggest a slightly different set of aims than the ones elaborated on by the IDF spokesman last night, which was that this is to remove Iran as a potential nuclear threat, suggesting that there's more in Israel's aims there.
When one looks at that point, Niamh, and the idea that quite often I find when analyzed this situation from Iranian perspective is it the primary strategy the preservation of the regime, or is the primary strategy the defense of the country? Sometimes those are the same thing, but ultimately sometimes they're not. And this could be one of those times where there's a divergence. And I'm wondering, as control risks analyze the situation, do you look at that particular point, and how do you reflect on it?
We do. It's something that we're watching very closely. For now, we think that, the senior military officials, IRGC, who are ultimately overseeing the response to Israel's attacks, are prioritizing both of those things. There may come a point in the next couple of weeks, because we are expecting this to be weeks rather than just days, at which, as you said, those two are no longer mutually exclusive, and or they are mutually exclusive, I should say, and that regime preservation becomes the absolute priority. We're not there yet. But we could reach that moment, but I think Israel has to do a great deal more damage to Iranian infrastructure, an enormous amount, to wipe in so much economic value off the country before the senior officials shift to regime preservation above all else.
Adi, obviously there's a lot of stakeholders here. There's a lot of potential winners and losers. But you mentioned earlier that China could be a loser as an importer of Russian crude, or an importer of Iranian crude, which is, one would say, would appear, at least in recent times, to be more an opportunistic buy because of the discount. But ultimately, the region as a whole, the Gulf region, 25 million barrels of oil produced here every day across all the countries. The biggest, nearly all of it goes to Asia. India, China, and everybody else. We don't see them screaming too loudly about sort of contain this. It's all G7 West, stressing out. But the biggest sort of supplier or customers of this region's energy is Asia. Where do you see Asia playing its part or its vulnerability to this moment?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that's something we haven't touched at all. Absolutely. Asia is where most of the oil is going in the first place. Interestingly enough, Asia is not screaming for one simple reason. Just prior to the conflict, there was the spot market in the what I call the canary in the coal mine crude, which is Nigerian, primarily West African, primarily Nigerian crude, was really well supplied. So it was under a lot of pressure, and Asia simply came led by India, came in and just bought a lot of West African barrels supporting that market. So that's the first sort of choice for Asian buyers. The second one, after that's exhausted, will be shipping from oil from the United States. Well, one thing that we haven't mentioned is one other cost of the conflict is going to be shipping. Shipping costs are very likely to go, well, they've gone up already, but I think the insurance premiums could easily be tenfold what they are right now, which very roughly, I mean, super roughly, as a rule of thumb, would increase shipping by at least $0.50 per barrel, sorry. So that's quite a lot. Or on a VLCC, some roughly $500,000 extra cost. So that's going to hurt everyone, including Asia. Now, at the moment, it's fine. As I mentioned, China had a lot of Iranian oil still floating around, plenty of West African oil out there, and the United States would probably channel some of that oil from Europe that normally goes to Europe would also go to Asia, and there should be plentiful supply in terms of counting barrels. Um, just to offer one, but on another subject, if you don't mind, you
Please.
wanted bridges, and just to offer one solution out of this horrible, horrible conundrum, because I do worry that this situation is rather horrible. The easiest way would be actually, the easy way out of this would be for Israeli security service and Israeli people basically to do what Serbia did during the former Yugoslavian wars. Take Netanyahu, put him to prison where he belongs anyway, or even better, send him to ICC. I think a peace with Iran would come very, very quickly in that respect, and the whole situation will be resolved. And the reason for this thinking is because he's the only person in this whole world that's actually benefiting out of this war. Nobody else is.
Well, it certainly was a vote in the Senate or the Knesset last week in which he won the vote of no confidence. They, in this survey, agree that the premium is where it's at and nothing going to move until there's actual physical targeted, and then there's disagree. So that's kind of nearly 50-50 in my world. So it is the question, will this continue to rise, the price given, or will we wait for a actual physical hit on infrastructure or supply before it moves into another bracket? I mean, strangely, we're just back to the levels of price that we were before Trump announced the April 2nd liberation tariff sort of scenario. So we haven't really seen real drama in the oil price like we saw, for example, in the early days of the war of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where we topped well over 100 and then came back. No real big spike given the neighborhood we're in. So very muted response. Maybe that's yet to come. Nivek Bernie in Dubai, awesome. Thank you so much. Omar Najia, Monday morning quarterback, and Adi Absurovic in the lovely, quiet tranquility of Surrey. We are envious and wish you all a great week. All the best, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.